Peace, family. So it's Sunday, January the 25th, 11:08, and we will be resuming Why I Make Art Contemporary Artist Stories about life and work. So let's get it. We stopped at Gregory Crutzen. There's mine. When photographer Gregory Crutzen was growing up in Brooklyn in the 1960s and 70s, his psychoanalyst father would conduct sessions with patients in the basement of the family's brownstone in Park Slope. That was really significant in terms of my artistic development, says Crutzen, who now lives in Berkshire's and mountainous region in western Massachusetts. My brother and my sister, too, we all have distinct memories of when patients come up the street. We knew not to acknowledge them in any way. We were told to be very quiet, despite his parents' warnings. Crutzen's curiosity about what was happening behind closed doors would often get the better of him. One of my earliest memories is attempting to listen to the sessions, he recalls. As a young child, I liked trying to project an image of what I thought I'd heard. It's a very nature of having secrets, something forbidden and separate from you. When I think back to it, that's one of my defining aesthetic memories of awakenings. That idea of trying to project a story onto something that is slightly removed from you. There's something about the formal interplay and the dynamic between domestic life and something that's withheld, forbidden, or secret, he adds. I think that's a defining tension in all of my works. Known for his haunting, filmic tableaux of misthread suburban streets and uncanny interior spaces inhabited by enigmatic, forlorn figures, Crutzen presents small-town life through a cinematic lens, full of narrative and intrigue, emphasizing bigotry. If I'm like messing up the words, please forgive me. Ambiguity. His photographs present senses wrapped in illusions and elusiveness. What is seen can be powerful as what is left out of view. Photography is very limited in terms of any capacity to say anything at all, he says. It's a frozen moment that will never reveal its story in a literal way. That's part of why I'm drawn to it, because of the open-ended nature of all pictures. I'm very much interested in a moment that seems to exist between something before and something after. Before focusing his energies on photography, the teenage Crutzen found a creative outlet playing guitar with his post-punk band, the Speedies. The five-piece group had an underground hit with 1979's Let Me Take Your Photo, which was later used in Hewlett-Packard commercial for portable printers. A review at the time described the Speedies' style as sweet pop rock with a dollop of venom, soaking up the punk scene in Manhattan and legendary venues like Madison, Kansas City, and CBGB was a thrilling, formative ride, and music remains important to Crutzen today. He collaborated with Wilco's Jeff Tweedy on a video and book accompanying his photo series In Eclipse of Moths, 2020. It was only after the Speedies broke up that Crutzen began to explore photography in earnest. And while he is now the director of graduate studies in photography at Yale University School of Arts, where he did his own MFA, early on Crutzen found he's frustrated about his studies. I had difficulty academically. I was sort of dyslexic And the nature of test taking and writing papers and even reading was somewhat painful for me, he says. I went to SUNY Purchase and thought I would follow the line of my father and try to be a psychiatrist, but I just couldn't academically. I wound up taking a photo class out of curiosity and found the moment I made my first picture. I immediately knew I could read a photograph in a way that I couldn't absorb other things. Just the frozen, mute nature of it. It became immediately apparent to me that this was something I understood and loved. Even then, he was captivated by the relationship between still photography and moving image. I was taking classes at Hitchcock in the 1950s, melodrama and horror films. These are things that are defining for me. Now, what's great about a film like Rear Window, I love all of the Hitchcock's films, but that one particularly is that it's really about the uncomfortable relationships between being a photographer and being the voyeuristic and impotent at the same time. That set beautifully described the fascination with peering into others people's lives, but also the inability to be active. He continues, referring to the mystery thriller's central narrative of an injured and therefore incapacitated photographer's voyeuristic relationship with his neighbors. I think all photographers, in a certain way, are drawn to the medium by a similar kind of detachment or move. Channeling James Stewart, increasingly haunted by characters in Rear Window, Crewson imbues his images with the impression of something mysterious, fleetingly caught, which serves a catalyst for the imagination. There's a certain element in my work always. I describe it as being there, but not there. You're at a slight remove peering in the world. My pictures are at their best. There's a coming together of intimacy and detachment that's an interesting dynamic. Crewson has been exhibiting for over 30 years, achieving great renown for his series including Natural Wonder 1991 through 95, Twilight 98 through 2002, Beneath the Roses 2003 through 07, and Cathedral of the Pines 2013 through 14. The expressive titles marry well with images of domestic space flooded with shafts of muted light, or literally flooded with water, lone suburban figures and fireflies, lighting up landscapes at dusk, held in collections all over the world. His work is recognizable as the Americana he lovingly skews, and the majority of his images thought set in distinct temporality with photographed in the U.S. One notable exception in his Sanctuary series from 2009, shot in Cinecittà, the studios in Rome where famed directors Fellini, Rossellini, and Visconti made their films. A sense of timelessness is a signature component of Crewson's image. Though he sees that making a document of something directly that addresses our time may be a purview of great photojournalism, his focus lies elsewhere. I'm more interested in making images that are less knowable, less fixed or direct, that are more ambiguous and more, poetic in a certain way, he says. I go through an enormous amount of energy to remove any sign of everyday contemporary life in my pictures, he continues. There are no cell phones in all the cars and houses and figures. They all feel somewhat outside of time and faded and slightly broken. So they're part of the pictures that feels removed from the moment. And then there's also parts that the ambiance that feels very much of the movement. I like the tension. As an example, Crewson's recent series, An Eclipse of Moss, which he made in 2018 through 19 and exhibited in late 2020 at Galaxy, Los Angeles, frames scenes of post-industrial desolation and rural decline. Shot from a distance, figures are pictured alone and diminished on decaying streets, and works with evocative titles such as Funerary Backlot, Alone Street, and Redemption Center. Really dope. These plaintive set pieces portray humanity's relationship with the modern world as a struggle that extends back and forth in our collective memories. I always want to make pictures that feel first and foremost beautiful and mysterious, Cruzan explains. Certainly some of the central themes of an eclipse of moth include alienation and brokenness, and some hope of redemption. I would say I very deliberately made them all in these anonymous and somewhat non-descriptive script locations. I wanted them to have a vast scale with smaller figures inhabiting these places. Whatever the series, Cruz's work immerses the viewer in a world that seems culled from a film, a freeze frame, as opposed to a still or moment in a dream somehow crisply remembered. Clearly my pictures have been shaped by the way movies look, he says. I love going to movie theaters and being part of the collective dream of seeing light projected on the screen, which is such a beautiful dreamlike state. His process is another aspect of his work that resonates with the labor and time-intensive nature of film production, each location in Cruz's dreamily suggestive images and meticulously scouted before being staged, lit and photographed, employing a crew of up to 50 people, including lighting, scenic location crews. It often pairs the process with that of making an independent film. It's a very similar art, he explains, in that it goes from conception, pre-production, production, post-production, finally, at the very end, having the premiere of that work. And then you start the process again. It's very challenging. Fortunately, I have galleries that help support the venture, but it's never easy, and you also have to be incredibly inventive in terms of ways to cut costs and depend on the kindness of others. There are ways to do it. It begins with the artist searching for the right place to shoot. That can take months, finding locations that I feel are that can accommodate one of the pictures, looking for something that feels ordinary and nondescript, but also like it can have a certain kind of formal beauty, he says. Through that process, he explains, images begin to appear to him. Then he starts working with his partner, Julianne, on writing the descriptions for each photo. Closer to production, he is joined by a line producer and his longtime director of photography, Rick Sands, and the rest of the team. It then takes about a year to work on the post-production, which is done in the Berkshires alongside Cruz's printer, who comes out to live there for the duration of the part of the process. Working together bit by bit, they composite the images, spending much time and effort trying to recreate what it feels like to make the picture. Cruzan explains, altogether, it's about 2 or 3 year process. The beginning to end, he adds. The shortest period of time is the time where we're actually making the picture, fortunately. An eclipse of the moth was made in the town near the artist's home in Berkshire in the western Massachusetts, where he lives in former Methodist church dating from the 1890s. Cruzan is something of a known figure with the locals, who proves to be extraordinarily supportive of his shoots. He actually asks a lot from them in his body of work. We needed to change light bulbs on the street lamps and try to have them not mow or pave. So there are a lot of things that they help us with, he says. But while the mechanics and phases of production are critical to the process, ultimately, they are all in the service of a final image. I do really love production, and I love the hectic quality of it. Things are going wrong, and we're losing a lot, and there are weather problems, and some neighbors aren't being cooperative, or we have technical issues. This lift doesn't work, or the fog machine is down, he says, but in the end, the picture works. All the receipts, and there are the moments of grace where it all makes sense, and it makes it all worth it to me. At the core of it, the vision is the most important thing. It's the story that you want to tell, and will it into existence in one way or another. His aim is for all of the production to be invisible. What I really want is for it all to disappear, to create a world that feels convincing and real and lived in. I want the viewer to feel like they could enter into the world and be a part of it. And though his works and process are meticulously considered, the making of Gregory Crewdson image is also an alchemy of different intuitions. When I'm making pictures, again, not consciously, there are at least three competing forces that kind of exist and create tensions, he explains. One of that, just by the very venture pictures have to refer to other pictures. There's always a relationship between the pictures I've made and the tradition of and history of the medium. So they are always looking backwards in one way or another and playing off the lection. And there's also your personal story, your own obsessions and desires and fears and complications expressed in the pictures. And then ultimately the pictures take on relevance to the moment that they exist in, so that's another set of dynamics. I think that when art is functioning at its highest degree, those three competing forces have absolute balance, and that's always my hope or my ambition. Crewdson was the subject of 2012's documentary, Brief Encounters, which trace a 10-year period in the artist's life, and he has contemplated on getting behind a film camera himself. The main challenge, as he sees it, would be to extend the singular word he has created, with its ambiguity and strong sense of story, into a feature-length form. If everything felt right, I would like to try it. But in the meantime, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, which is continuing to make still photograph feel powerful and important and mean something in this time. Crewdson's intensive process in his quest to make each image meaningful in multiple ways leaves him less inclined to take photographs when he's not working on specific projects. That time is spent with family or teaching and on other passions, whether going to the movies, listening to music, or open water swimming. I am by nature sort of uncomfortable with cameras, and even when we're shooting, I frame the scene, but I have a cameraman making the actual exposures. He says, I want to have a direct relationship to what I see in front of me, what's most interesting is that thing, the world that we've created that only comes to life for fractions of a second. So I don't tend to take many pictures outside of being an artist. I actually don't even own my own camera. On occasions, I'll take some cell phone pictures of my kids or something, but I have a weird disconnection relationship to the actual medium. The digital world, with its surf-felt imagery, underlines just how important the photograph as art piece remains to the cultural landscape. Crewdson elaborates that pictures have a very short life in the virtual space. All photographs have to think about that and their relationships to it, and acknowledge that's how 99.9% of images work now, as instantaneous and disposable The real challenge is to make pictures that feel lasting and permanent and physical, like a physical thing that exists on a wall. That's an object rather a mirage. He is an admirer of Japanese photograph. He is an admirer of Japanese photography and architect Hiroshi Sugimoto's ongoing theaters series, the years-long body of work comprising photographs of entire movies captured within a single photographic exposure shot in the U.S. The project includes images of luminous blank screens framed by the architectural and topographical features of a cinema or drive-in. It's a project that neatly dovetails with Crusen's own interests. They're beautiful meditations on the nature of time and the landscape and the photographic images. In the photographic image, he says, I think they're really powerful pictures. Sugimoto's image also speaks to the Crusen love of cinema experience, itself akin to his belief in the importance of the gallery show, which really fulfills an important need that we all have, and that is to connect to something outside of ourselves and have that moment of deliberation and clarity. He says, while the reliance on digital imagery of all kinds have only increased of late, Crusen believes it is the job of the photographer to make pictures that cut through. What's powerful about photography in general, and why I'm drawn to the medium, is that it's democratic in a certain way. It's the currency of our culture. We all inherently understand how to read pictures on a daily basis, he says, and that's very different from other forms of art. Where I was at, somebody was calling me. And that's very different from other forms of art, which are by their nature more hermetic and kind of privatized in a way that challenge of being a photographer is trying to create a singular vision in the enormous and overwhelming network of images. But if you can figure out a way to do it, or at least attempt to it, could be meaningful to much a larger audience because of the inherent way we can connect to the photograph, and the way that we can connect to the photograph. And I'm gonna stop at Heather Day. That was really interesting. Very interesting. Thank you all for tuning in to this read. I'm gonna start catching up. It's a lot going on. Family coming tomorrow, so I'm just like setting the intent to just be at ease, to breathe, to just be present, and yeah, hopefully I might vlog a bit. I might not, but I love you all. Thank you for tuning in. And art it's really up to you to create uniquely from your experience. Don't compare your art, but just see the uniqueness in your design and your creativity and your ideas. It's really great reading this book. And let me show you all another book that I got. So, Julia Cameron, Living the Artist's Way, An Intuitive Path to Greater Creativity. And the librarian, she put other books from Julia on hold for me. So, I want to read this when I'm finished this, because I'm just here to learn and go with the flow of my creativity, and I just feel as though these books will aid in my growth. So, yeah. Thank you for staying tuned up to this point, up to this portion of the video. I love you. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.